He was known as the Quiet One, the spiritual soul of the Beatles, and while Lennon and McCartney soaked up the spotlight, George Harrison quietly forged his own identity within the band. But beneath that placid exterior seethed a deep-seated resentment, one that few saw coming. So who was the object of this hidden fury of George? Was it a bandmate who stole the limelight? A manager who pulled the strings? Or someone even more unexpected? Today, we peel back the curtain on the most complicated and maybe surprising relationship in Beatles history. Because behind the music and fame lies a grudge that could change forever how we view the Fab Four. Buckle up as we uncover the truth about the man George Harrison despised most. While the songwriting rivalry between John Lennon and Paul McCartney is well documented, there have been for years rumors of another troubled relationship. This time, it puts the spotlight on George Harrison and the one person he allegedly harbored a deep animosity towards. The dynamics of power and creative control in the band often caused friction, especially with Harrison, who, wanting more creative input and recognition for his ideas, was constantly overshadowed by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. But before we get to that, let's go back to how it all began. Early life. George Harrison was born on February 25, 1943 at 12, Arnold Grove in Wavertree, Liverpool. He was the youngest of 4 children to Harold Hargreaves Harrison and Louise Harrison. Harold had worked as a bus conductor but had earlier served as a ship's steward with the White Star Line, while Louise was of Irish Catholic descent and worked as a shop assistant. George had 3 siblings, 1 elder sister, Louise, and 2 elder brothers, Harold and Peter. According to Boyd, a biographer of Harrison, his mother Louise was particularly supportive of her children's happiness, recognizing George's passion for music as a source of joy for him. Louise Harrison, George Harrison's mother, was always very fond of music and had been. Her enthusiastic singing voice, which could rattle the windows of their home, much to the visitor's surprise. When she was pregnant with George, she would often tune into the Radio India broadcasts and was attracted by the mystic sounds of sitars and tablas. She hopes this exotic music will bring serenity and calm to her unborn baby. Harrison biographer Joshua Green wrote, "Every Sunday, she tuned into mystical sounds evoked by sitars and tablas, hoping that the exotic music would bring peace and calm to the baby in the womb." The Harrison family initially lived at 12 Arnold Grove, a modest terraced house in Wavertree, Liverpool, where George spent his first 4 years. There was an outside toilet, and it was not very modern, with heating provided by 1 coal fire. In 1949, the family moved to a council house at 25 Upton Green in Speke. When he was 5 years old, George enrolled at Dovedale Primary School. He later passed the 11+ exam and attended Liverpool Institute High School for Boys from 1954 until 1959. Although the school had a course in music, the lack of guitars disappointed George, and he felt stifled in such an educational environment. The early musical influences on George Harrison were diverse and formative, inspired by such artists as George Formby, Cab Calloway, Django Reinhardt, Hoagy Carmichael, Carl Perkins, and Lonnie Donegan when he was young in the 1950s. However, it was a pivotal moment in early 1956 that profoundly affected him. Riding his bicycle, he heard Elvis Presley's Springing from a Neighbor's House and instantly piquing his interest in rock and roll, Heartbreak Hotel. Even during his school days at the Liverpool Institute High School for Boys, his passion for music was evident as he would often doodle guitars in his school books and say, "I was totally into guitars." Another major influence on him was Slim Whitman, in whom he saw in a magazine or on television, thereby solidifying his interest in the instrument. At the age of 14, Harrison's musical journey took a practical turn when his friend Raymond Hughes offered to sell him a guitar. His mother, Louise, bought it for £3.10, which today would be around £110 by 2024. A friend of the family taught Harrison some fundamental songs such as Whispering, Sweet Sue, and Dinah set him on his path as a guitarist. Inspired by Lonnie Donegan's skiffle music, Harrison formed his skiffle group called the Rebels along with his brother Peter and friend Arthur Kelly. It was during this time, on the bus to school, that he encountered Paul McCartney. That was the beginning of the foundation of a lifelong friendship and musical relationship which would forge the course of music history. Early career in March 1958, George Harrison auditioned for John Lennon and Paul McCartney's skiffle group, the Quarrymen, at Rory Storm's Morgue's Skiffle Club. Initially, Lennon felt Harrison, who had just turned 15, was too young to join. However, McCartney arranged a second audition on a Liverpool bus, where Harrison impressed Lennon by playing the lead guitar part for Raunchy. This led to Harrison socializing with the group and eventually becoming a full member. Even though his father wanted him to continue his education, Harrison left school at 16 and started an apprenticeship as an electrician at Blackler's, a local department store. During the Quarrymen's first tour of Scotland in 1960, Harrison used the pseudonym Carl Harrison, named after the musician Carl Perkins. This period marked the beginning of Harrison's journey with the Beatles, where his guitar, his skills and musical contributions would play an essential part in the evolution and success of the band. In 1960, the Beatles, via Alan Williams' manager, booked engagements at Indra and Kaiserkeller clubs in Hamburg, Germany, both of which were owned by Bruno Koschmider. This was their first residency in Hamburg, and they started developing their musical talents. Was still active in the lively club scene, but their time was short-lived due to George Harrison, still underage, got deported because of not being able to work legally in nightclubs. By December 1961, Brian Epstein had taken over as their manager, refining their public image, and ultimately secured them a recording contract with EMI. Their first single, Love Me Do, was released and reached number 17 on the record retailer chart. The following year, their first album, Please Please Me, launched them into the stratosphere of fame as Beatlemania swept across the globe. George Harrison was a serious and focused character when on stage. He gained the name, The Quiet Beatle. This title became prominent during the arrival of the Beatles in the United States. Early 1964, when Harrison was seriously sick with strep throat and a fever. Medical advice. This prompted him to save his voice for their upcoming appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, where the Beatles made a historic television appearance that helped fuel their worldwide popularity. George Harrison became known as the Quiet Beatle during the Beatles tours, where his introverted personality stood in noticeable contrast to his more boisterous bandmates. This nickname, coined by the press, it amused Harrison himself and persisted throughout his career. Musically, Harrison's influence within the Beatles began to assert itself. He had two lead vocal credits for the Beatles' first album, including the hit single Do You Want to Know a Secret, written by Lennon McCartney. With their second album, with the Beatles, 1963, Harrison had 3 lead vocal credits, including Don't Bother Me, which was his first solo writing credit. Harrison also played an important role as the Beatles' scout for new American releases, in particular to soul. His musical taste broadened even further by the time of Rubber Soul, 1965, where he led the band toward folk rock influences inspired by the Byrds and Bob Dylan. Also, his experimentation with Indian classical music started surfacing, most notably with his use of the sitar on Norwegian Wood, This Bird Has Flown. Harrison later expressed Rubber Soul as his favorite Beatles album. The album Revolver of 1966 revealed Harrison's growth as a songwriter and innovator. Within the band, his compositions included Taxman, which opened the album Love You, 2, featuring Indian musical elements like the sitar and tabla, and I Want to Tell You. The tambura part Harrison contributed to Lennon's Tomorrow Never Knows epitomized the Beatles' experimentation.